Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the BOCC work session and staff update meeting. Today's date is August the 20th, and the time is 10:28 a.m. We will take attendance beginning with Mr. Hirsch,
Brendan Hirsch.
Paula McFeeters.
Zach Swearingen,
Miles Lucero.
and thank you to everybody else in attendance. First up, we have Samantha Contreras with a presentation.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
So today we're going to talk about the private activity bonds. If you'll go to the first screen. There you go. So the private activity bonds program funds privately developed projects. The bonds are tax exempt and the amount of the bonds issued are limited by the IRS. Underwriters use investor money called board proceeds to make a loan to a project. The project then pays back the loan and the investors are repaid plus interest. The eligibility activities that we have are include new construction or acquisition, rehabilitation of housing for low to moderate income people, single-family mortgage revenue bonds sold by local and state agencies for mortgages for low and moderate income people, mortgage credit certificates, which is a bond allocation for qualified home buyers, manufacturing small issued industrial development bonds for the construction of manufacturing facilities that produce goods, qualified redevelopment bonds for acquiring property in blighted areas, preparing land for redevelopment, and relocating occupants of structures on the acquired property, exempt facility bonds for hazardous waste facilities, solid waste disposal facilities, water and sewer facilities, mass commuting facilities, local district heating and cooling facilities, local electric energy and gas facilities, and multifamily housing bonds. It also has the qualified 501c bonds for use by nonprofit hospitals and private universities. The process, the options for the use of the private activity bonds must be done by September 15th. So our options are issue volume cap for specific PAB projects, assign volume cap to another local government or housing authority to assist their qualified project, assign cap to another issuer such as Jaffa to assist with a qualified project and their single family programs, relinquish bond volume cap to the statewide balance, carry forward volume cap for up to the next 3 years until a sufficient quality of bond cap is accumulated to issue it for a qualified project. And we must have a specific project in mind. And if that project fails, we may issue it for another similar project. The bond cap may only be carried forward for 3 years, and the oldest bond cap allocation must be used first. Our recommendation is to carry forward a volume cap. The project will be the Tava Square Apartments project. We did the same as last year. For this project, the city and county PAB allocations would be as the following. For 2025, it was $7,334,977 with the city, and the counties was $3,724,705. For 2026, the cities was $7,675,759. For the county, it was $3,901,074. So the total amount is $15,011,736 from the city of Pueblo, and a total of $7,625,779 from Pueblo County if we are approved. So that makes it a total project of amount of $22,637,515 for this project.
Can I ask a clarifying question, ma'am?
You sure can.
That $7.6 million, that's last year's allocation carried forward plus this year's allocation? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then when do we foresee actually deploying these dollars toward that project? It must be a next year thing, right?
So Tava Square representative is here, so if you have specific project questions, she definitely can come forward and answer any of those in terms of actual development and the timeline of the development.
So this will be a LIHTC application, 4% non-competitive, that we'll be applying for in Q1 of 2027, which would give us a closing in Q1 of 2028. The rollover allocation goes towards the project, but deploying them doesn't come until we close.
So it looks like 2028 is when it would be deployed if their LIHTC application is approved.
And what is LIHTC?
Low-income housing tax credits.
Okay, thank you.
The tax credits that are applied to the project by the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority.
Okay. Can you take me back a couple years to how you engage the city and the county and I guess just the history of how the city and the county agreed, like this is the project we want to accumulate
Sure.
these funds for?
So back in, every year we get a PAB allocation. And historically, we have either designated to an entity or we designated it to CHAFA because we didn't have a project that was available. So in 2020, let's see, we're in 2026. So in late 2024, early 2025, we heard of the Tavis Square project. They came and asked us if this was a project we'd be interested in. So we brought it forward to the board. This is a board decision. So she made that presentation to you all. You guys decided that this was a project we did want to invest in instead of allocating these bonds to CHAFA. So when we allocate to CHAFA, it's more for like single family home programs. This one is actual for development. We also thought it could potentially help our community with Prop 123. And so we wanted to invest in this specific project. And then it's up to the developer to then go and however they need to put their finance packaging together. So it looks like they're still wanting to do the low income tax credits. So that's when they're going to go forward and make that application. Ashley, I'm not sure if you guys applied before or is this going to be your first application for those LIHTC credits?
So I'm with Rocky Mountain Communities, which is a Colorado state-based nonprofit affordable housing developer. They are based out of the Denver area. I'm actually based here in Pueblo. And so we have done a lot of these kinds of projects throughout the state, but we've never done one here in Pueblo. So we're modeling after what we've done in the past where we're taking the PAB allocations. Those allow us to get lower interest debt to make sort of the funding work a lot better, and then doing it here in Pueblo. But we have currently two LIHTC award projects that are in process in Fort Morgan and in Denver.
Okay.
So
What's the general neighborhood where this project's sited here in town?
this project, we're looking at the west side over off of 24th Street.
Okay.
I remember the presentation from last year where you gave us a good overview of what it would look like and where it would be located. And so I do appreciate the follow-up of where we are with it. I kind of wondered, what the process was. So appreciate the update on the bonds and what you're doing in terms of accumulating that.
Yeah, and that's why the state allows for that 3-year carryover because these projects don't happen
Right.
generally in a year, sometimes even 2 years. It does take that long of a runway.
Time.
I was thinking of a runway in order to get the project up and going. So that's why we're allowed to carry over for 3 years for a specific project.
So did we carry over in 2024 as well?
We did not carry, we only carried over 2025 and 2020. If approved by you all, we'll carry over 2026. And then we'll look to see what projects present themselves for 2027 and bring that back to you all to make that decision about what we're going to do with the PAB allocation in 2027.
Okay.
I apologize if you said it, but is there a restriction on rollover? I mean,
Samantha touched on it a little bit. The only restriction is that if something happened in Tava Square, the Tava Square project fell through, we would have to issue those, find another project that's similar in nature in order to continue to move forward with those carryovers.
but there's no time restriction on you can roll it over for 2 years, 3 years.
3 years, 3 years
years.
is the limit of carryover.
Okay. So if this board is in favor of carrying over as recommended, do we need a formal resolution that?
We do, and so we would come back to you at the next BOCC meeting and ask for that resolution approving.
Yeah, I
Comfortable
got no
with it.
issues.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Next up, Kurt Maddock from Puebleplex with a presentation.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Russell DeSalvo with Puebleplex. Thank you for the opportunity to meet with you today. As you know, Puebleplex is bringing forth the idea of the county forming a county revitalization authority. We've also engaged Bear Peak Law to assist the county in implementing a county revitalization authority if you choose to move forward with this concept. As you also probably know from information that we've provided, CRAs are economic development tools that can be used for community development, affordable housing development, tax base enhancement, infrastructure improvements that the county needs in blighted areas and distressed areas similar to the Aspen Acres fire. So there might be some tools here that we can implement really quickly if you so choose that can assist the county and our residents. And so I'd like to turn it over to Paul Benedetti from Bear Peak Law to explain the concept and next steps if you want to move forward with this concept and answer any questions that you might have. So really appreciate your consideration, and we're hopeful that you'll recommend moving forward with this County Revitalization Authority. So thank you once again. Paul?
Yeah, thank you, Russell. Yeah, my name is Paul Benedetti. I'm not actually with Bear Creek Law. I associate with them with my colleague, Nick Larson here. I'm an attorney, longtime redevelopment attorney, specializing in tax increment financing and redevelopment projects. Here in Pueblo, I've been a longtime special counsel to the Pueblo Urban Renewal Authority, and I've worked on most of their projects that have been implemented in the city over the years. I'm still working with them on the CSU project, but I'm here with Nick, who Nick Larson is a experienced attorney, mostly as a developer attorney, most recently with the Brownstein Law Firm. He's gone out on his own now. He's engaging in redevelopment law, tax increment financing. We're working together on several projects. Nick's also a developer. I just give you, that's his sideline or his main occupation. I'm not sure which, but I told him I think he ought to stick to development. I think the laws are harder, but he wants to get into this area of the law and work on it. So we're here. I'm not going to take up too much of your time. We have a handout there that we've given you. Nick has prepared it. Community or a county revitalization authority is a new animal created by the legislature. To my knowledge, there's only been one that's been formed in the state so far. Several counties are working on getting them in place, but last I checked, the only county that's actually formed an authority and has developed county revitalization plan areas with plans in place is Warfano County. And I worked on that project with Nick. We put it together. So the law is quite similar to the urban renewal law that the municipalities have used for years. It has the tax increment provisions of that statute. It does not implement them all. There are changes in there that are significant. School districts are not permitted to participate or to pledge any tax increment revenues. So it would be, if you form an authority, that's the first step. A second step is to engage the taxing bodies, but not the school districts. So let's start on page one. You have a handout there. You have 4 steps. Forming the authority is not a particularly complicated procedure. And steps 1 and 2 can actually be switched. The county commissioners have the option of forming the authority by resolution, or you can, there can be a procedure where 25 electors in the county petition the county to form the authority, and then you proceed to a public hearing. If you decide you don't need a petition, you would just advertise. The only legal requirement is advertise in the newspaper 30 days advance notice of your intention to consider forming a CRA authority. Now, that would be a body corporate and politic, which can operate countywide. And within that area, the next step would be for the county commissioners to decide if they want to have smaller county revitalization areas where you implement land use procedures, tax increment financing, that sort of thing, specific areas where you would use the powers of the act. So the findings to form the authority after you have the 30 days notice and you have the public hearing, the findings, they're somewhat similar to what's in the urban renewal law. They're phrased a little differently. You have certainly things like lack of infrastructure, a contaminated area, dilapidated buildings, that sort of thing. You also have in there an economic development factor, that this area would be particularly advantageous for economic development and creation of jobs. And that is a little bit different. So if you made that determination, then there'd be a simple resolution before you. And then attached to that resolution would be, we would recommend, it's part of the resolution, appointing the board of an independent board to govern the activities of the authority. And there's a provision in there which I think I would recommend that you adopt, because it's probably easier as a commission appoint itself. The county commissioners appoint themselves as the board. And then there's a provision in there for taxing entities that are affected by tax increment financing. And the statute wording's a little, it's difficult to say that these entities would petition the county to join the authority. Well, I don't know. I think the best way to do it would be to, if you have areas in mind that you would like to designate as CRA areas, that you would engage those particular taxing entities and ask them to join the authority. And the way it's worded, if they join, you would want them to join. They would get together and appoint their own board member if they want to. But there's only one additional board member to represent all the special districts, taxing entities in the county would be on the board, regardless of where the project areas were. Of course, it would be advantageous if you had one, that may be levied countywide. So, for instance, in the Pueblo-Plex area, we have a water district, the library district, the school district, which of course couldn't levy, and of course the county. And we would expect the county, the principal reason, there are two principal reasons I think for adopting a plan. Well, there actually, let me say three. First would be, it's an independent corporate body. It's not a government, so it can do multiple fiscal year obligations outside of Tabor. At least that's the same structure as an urban renewal authority. has the benefit of using tax increment financing, property tax increment financing. And if you have commercial uses in there, of course, the county could also designate its sales tax increments under that procedure. And one thing I think that might be useful, listening to the problems here with the fire area, and I'm very familiar with that. I grew up in Walsenburg, so I know that area well. My niece owns a home there. It, fortunately, it wasn't damaged, as far as I know. But you could institute some provisions in here to maybe help speed up permitting and rebuilding, land use and building requirements. That would be up to you if you wanted to adopt something in here to help speed up the process of rebuilding or reprocessing. And then you have also, through the authority, a way to maybe help coordinate some of the and leveraging some of the financial assistance that's coming from the federal government or other places. It would be a centralized area where maybe that the county commissioners wearing a different hat can help coordinate and speed up distribution of those funds and make sure they're being used properly. So that's one benefit. There is a procedure in the statute regarding disaster areas that you can approve a plan without going through the notices of public hearing. In other words, you can just adopt the plan because it's a federally designated disaster area. Now, for my clients, our clients, Puebloplex, of course, any plan areas that we'd be interested in for them would be, of course, have to go through the full process. And the plan approval process is sort of summarized here on page 2 of this handout. You can adopt the plan. It's again, have to identify the area. What are the boundaries? You're going to study the area, make sure it qualifies, has at least one of the factors in there. Now, we state in here an impact report. The statute only requires an impact report, meaning if you use tax increment financing, are there any impacts on the governing bodies? And maybe you recognize provision or negotiations with the Pueblo Urban Renewal Authority about impacts that their projects may or may not have on the county. But usually the impacts are minimal because these are new funds that do not exist but for the project. Now, the only legal requirement for an impact report is for municipalities within 1 mile of the project area, proposed project area. When you form the authority, there is a requirement that you notify any municipalities within, it says 3 miles of the authority. Well, it can't be that because it'd be 3 miles of the entire county. So I think the only interpretation would be 3 miles of any area you might have in mind when you're talking about forming the authority. And then there'd be another just because they elect to join the authority, and we want everybody to join so they can participate in the planning, when it came down to approving a specific project area and you were going to ask the taxing entities to opt in, this is one provision in the statute that does not exist in the urban renewal statute. In that statute, you have to negotiate with the taxing entities about impacts the project would have on their services or revenues. And there usually aren't very many because the revenues don't exist and the project is really self-financing when you use tax increment financing. But for the county revitalization area without the school district, you don't have quite as many TIF funds, but you have to convince the counties to opt in and join, and you would, by that means, the way we did it in the county where we formed the authority, we drafted what amounts to a tax increment agreement, similar to what you may see when the Pueblo Urban Renewal Authority comes to you and asks you for, the consent to use 100% of property taxes for the CSU project or any of their other urban renewal projects. So it's a similar type process. And then you have to go to the Planning Commission for a review about whether it conforms with the comprehensive plan. You have a 30-day notice of the public hearing. You're supposed to give 30 days notice to any businesses, mail notice to any businesses, property owners and residents that might live in the area. Now, for a disaster, you can skip all that. I mean, you can just adopt the plan. And if you're thinking of doing that, then, you should give serious consideration to putting some things in your plan that shortcut some of the red tape that would be involved, as long as you're not stepping on people's toes. I mean, I've been doing this long enough that I know it's best to talk to people and, sit down and hash things out at meetings, and then compromise if required. And then, of course, the authority would then implement the county revitalization plan. You can have multiple areas. You could have 4 or 5 or 6. And I would recommend that if you do, when you're considering areas, you make them fairly small because they're easier for the assessor to work with, easier for the authority to administer. If you make a large area, and that's the aim, then you would have several different redevelopment projects saying, producing tax increments, and each one would say, I want the tax increments I produce, but the way it works, it comes from the area as a whole. So the authority then is charged with drafting sort of complicated agreements that how the tax increments for each of these separate developments is going to be calculated and distributed when they come online. If you're lucky enough to have a single user project area, that's the way to go, even though you may have 3 or 4 of them rather than one. I've talked to Frank Beltran about this. He says it's much easier for them at the assessor's office to do 4 projects than it is to do one project that has all 4 of those within its boundaries. So that would be my personal recommendation. And then on page 3, we only talk about the what happens next, sort of a review, forming the authority, building the plan, and then after you get the plan in place, of course, all the redevelopment agreements and intergovernmental agreements that you may want to have between the county and the authority, and maybe the authority and other governments. But it's you can be pretty flexible with this tool, I think. So that's all I have to say, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for that. Are there any outs once, if say you go down this road and establish, I mean, are there off ramps, exits? I mean, if it's not working out, and what does that look like?
Well, if you don't have any revenue pledges, yeah, you can just
Dissolve?
void the plan.
Okay.
Or you can dissolve the authority if you want to, as long as it doesn't have any, but if it has contracts and you have redevelopment agreements, you've agreed to reimburse people for installing public improvements, for instance, or pledge revenues, then you would have to figure out a way to make good on those pledges. So
So it's more,
But for a plan area that's not working,
yeah,
you can just void the plan.
okay. And so it's much more based on the individual contracts of that area, whatever development, everything. It's not an overarching.
And they don't bleed over. Each of these areas
Got it.
would stand on its own, has its own financing. The only bleed over would be, you know, some kind of administration budget where maybe you pulled from projects. You have to keep once you have a debt, you have to keep the authority in place to service a debt. For instance, you can have 3 areas that don't work. You want to wipe out the plans, but you have a 4th
That is.
where you have plans. You can't wipe out the authority. You can wipe out the 3 plans.
Got it.
Mr. Benedetti, thank you for presenting today and explaining the forming of the authority. One question I did have is it possible to form an authority only in one area of the county? For example, if we decided to start this primarily for Puebloplex to see how it works before we expand countywide, or is it an all or nothing kind of strategy?
No, you form the authority. The authority is authorized to operate countywide, but as far as plans, each individual, if you only approve one plan, or just say the Puebloplex plans, those would be the only ones that would be in operation.
So you establish the authority as an overarching entity and then you plug and play on areas.
So I guess I have a lot of specific questions, but in general, I think it would be a mistake not to pursue this path. It's like the gentleman mentioned, it's a flexible tool that we need to explore that, you know, who knows what one day it could result in. So I'm strongly supportive of continuing down the path. As it relates to Puebloplex specifically, I guess I need to wrap my head around the intricacies of property taxes out there because they are a subdivision of the state. They're a political entity. They don't pay property taxes to the county directly like, you know, like everybody else in the county does. So I don't see where if we were to establish a TIF out there, where does the revenue come from to fund the TIF?
From the users. I mean, even though the entity that maybe owns the land is tax exempt, whatever use is on there that is taxable, it would be a taxable use. For instance, you know, there's the famous case, the Mesa Verde case, where the concessionaires they do pay property taxes because it's the use that gets taxed, and there's special provisions in the tax law and in the tax regulations for doing that. Plus, these uses, some of them, these are industrial uses, most likely. I'll let Russell can describe the uses, but property tax, personal property tax that would be available too as tax increments. And we have experience with that here in the assessor's office with places like with Vestas and the steel mill. That project area has not, I mean, it's completely taxable, but there are personal property taxes that raise a lot of revenue, most of the tax revenue.
So you can pay property tax on the rent of whatever entity is occupying Puebloplex specifically, and then in addition to that, the sales.
Sales and use tax, personal property tax. But the real intent of this for Puebloplex's perspective is to use this as a tool to actually transact property to the private sector. This is an economic development tool that if we had a developer that wanted to build something massive out there and we could generate, an extra $2 or $3 million a year in tax increment, to sell the property to the private sector owner or developer, that generates significant property taxes for Pueblo County. And that's the intent of us wanting to use this tool moving forward. We don't have a situation like that presently, but that's our intention because, as you well know, part of our legislative mandate is to increase the tax base of Pueblo County significantly over time. But this could be a real tool to incent developers to, put in the needed infrastructure, meaning, electrical substations, water and sewer, roadways, et cetera, in order to, spur that private sector development at Puebloplex. It's not our intention, to be this government-owned enclave, if you will, in perpetuity. We're just using the leasing mechanism that we have presently in the possessory interest tax, which is less than, what normal property tax would be, and we can have a sidebar conversation on that. But that's not our intention to sort of, hunker down in that phase in perpetuity. We want to get this property sold and into the private sector's hands.
Thank you, sir.
There's also a write-down provision in the statute where, whereas a government like the county generally has to sell property or transfer property for fair market value, the CRA can transfer or support a transfer from the owner to a developer for fair value, considering then that whoever would take title would also have to build a certain level of taxable improvements on the property within a certain amount of time. And there are covenants that the statute allows to make up for fair market value. But you can write the land down to whatever makes the project work within imposing those requirements on the ultimate builder.
Do you have any, if I may, do you have any thoughts about the RRA prospects for Pueblo-Plex? Have those discussions been brought up? The redevelopment reimbursement agreement prospects for companies who may be interested in Pueblo-Plex?
I think there are some, but I haven't.
But I'm not familiar with an RRA.
It's the
Redevelopment and reimbursement agreement.
right? Where
Always part of the process.
where a company would agree to develop, but also pay up front some of the costs associated with infrastructure for that particular property that's designated under a CRA.
Absolutely.
So if you have prospects, that's great.
Yeah, like I said, I don't have a specific project in mind yet for this particular initiative, but I thought we should get it established, have it on the shelf when we need it, or if the county has another, area that you'd like to try to do, for example, I've used, the Mesa, and maybe, there's a city or a Mesa sewer system or a wastewater treatment facility out there. You can do large projects like that under these types of initiatives. And so I think it just opens up the toolbox for the county and certainly for Pueblo-Plex long-term. But what we're trying to do, as of today is to get it established, start meeting with the county, and then we'll start presenting ideas to you. I know there's other, entities in town that would like to participate in this process as well. So hopefully that's
Yeah, I
answering your
think
question.
it's great. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Do you have, so I'm assuming that when you're looking at this, the frozen baseline is going to be sort of zero for many areas of Pueblo-Plex, right?
Well, it's not taxable. I assume it's off the tax rolls now.
Yeah.
We'd probably want to sit down with the assessor and find out what the base would be. I think next week they certify the base, 25th, I think. And some assessors will keep it at zero, but then that's not fair maybe to the base because it could never go up theoretically.
Right.
I think that generally what we would do if the assessor says he wants to establish a small base value that would increase then for inflation so that the taxing entities as an inducement for them to join the authority. That's probably the way we do it.
Interesting. And what about the administrative costs prior to, the revenue being generated from the growth base, the base?
Well,
if there are any, what is that amount? And
we would Pueblo-Plex is going to present you with documents, with drafts, and then of course the county can hire its own employees and attorney to operate as the staff of the CRA, or you can hire a separate staff, or you can contract with outside to provide a staff. So it's sort of up to you. And then you can reimburse yourselves maybe from some of the tax increments if there are enough. Usually you have a hard time if you're doing bonds. You need to keep a percentage of the tax increments as an administrative fee, so you can operate.
What kind of staffing are you looking at? Number of,
Well, I mean, it depends on how, I mean, I'm not a staffer, I'm just the attorney. Yeah, it would be, but I think the Pueblo Urban Renewal Authority operates with not a very big staff for all the work they do. So that's on you as an entity. Each county, each municipality has their own way of doing it. And I've worked in most of the municipalities in the state that have urban renewal projects or downtown development authority projects. And there's no one single way of doing it.
Is Puebleplex open to financing some of the administrative costs prior to the revenue generation, whether it's grant money, federal or state or otherwise?
good question.
Well, I think we'd be open to the idea of having the conversation, initially, like, I think what you're thinking is that we would start super small, like crawl before we walk. And, certainly we could, help the county. But my thought is that it would be embedded in the planning department, or, I'm just learning that urban renewal may be interested in, a contract with the county to manage the CRA on your behalf. And so I think there's options out there that we could all, work together to fund this. We understand the funding challenges that you have, but again, I think this is a super valuable tool for the county long term. And we certainly want to be a part of it, because I think we can, as a community, benefit greatly from these initiatives in the future. So
Thank you.
certainly open to the conversation. Sorry for the long answer.
No, that's fine, thank you.
I will say one thing on behalf of my client, that where we've done this work before on behalf of municipalities, the developer has recovered those costs as part of the project, because those are recoverable, eligible costs to be recovered.
In what kind of time frame? I mean, I know it's
Well, they have to-
situationally dependent, so.
They have to create their own fund to reimburse themselves. I mean, without any tax increments, you don't have any money usually, unless, there may be grant funds or something that you could use, or other funds. But if you're going to rely on tax increment funds, you have to build something that
Right.
produces taxes.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think I agree, it's a tool, and it could be utilized for the benefit of the entire county. It's just, as Robert alluded to, I mean, and you did too, Russ, like we're financially strapped, and to start creating staffing or even contracting, with other entities, it could be challenging for us, but, we would need to have those conversations moving forward, certainly.
Well, just a suggestion, I think the best way is we would ask you to decide whether you would just want to move forward with a resolution establishing the authority. If you don't want to go through the petition process, we would present you and your staff with a form of notice that you could publish and set a public hearing for formation of the authority. And we present a draft resolution forming the authority. And we would use some of the information from Pueblo-Plex as meeting the statutory criteria for the finding. And then we'd have a certificate attached to the resolution appointing the county commissioners as the board. You can appoint other board members if you want to. It's 5 to 8 members. But 5 to 8 members, but you can also appoint yourself under a special provision. So, and then you would want to, there's one area reserved, as I say, for the taxing entities. And then there's a certificate that you sign and send to DOLA. And once DOLA receives that and acknowledges that, that forms the authority. And in the meantime, you can be considering plan areas. And if you have an emergency plan area you want to consider, I could volunteer a little bit of my time to help, put something together. with your staff to outside of, if my client agrees, so I don't have to charge them for doing this, but it's not that difficult. And I would be happy to help draft a plan and maybe put some provisions in there to help speed up building and redevelopment of your disaster area.
Yeah, I think that that's a good plan moving forward to develop that initial. I would also ask, I mean, we have one member of our planning department in here, but you had said oftentimes it can live under planning, or it has historically. So I think that they should be involved in that conversation as well. So I think probably getting a draft and then bringing that forward and inviting planning staff here, and continuing the conversation, is probably the most logical next step.
I appreciate the you volunteering to keep the wheels in motion, and I'm strongly in favor of going down that road, letting, let's see a draft reso. Let's see what it looks like to establish a CRA, and knowing we don't have to do anything, but I think it's worth continuing to explore.
I agree. And I think the county's ability to have an economic development driver, as this authority would give us, is much needed. I think we need to continue to look for ways that we can develop the areas of the county that need that. So I'm very much in favor of moving down the road and getting more collaboration to get this done. I think this is a huge first step for us to even hear this plan presented. And thank you again for your time and effort. I'm very excited about what this can do for the county.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate the opportunity. And, I echo your sentiment that let's, start small. Let's get it established if you're willing, have it on the shelf. And then as we find a project or an idea or an initiative, whether that's, the Aspen Acres areas or Puebloplex, whatever comes first, then we put a plan together, figure out how to finance it, how we can work together, community wide. We're certainly happy to be part of that collaboration. So really appreciate it. I think we can all benefit from this long-term as a community. So thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
I'd like to acknowledge Pura for being here. Thank you, guys. I know you've been beating this drum of the CRA individually to me as well. So thank you. I think knowing that we have your expertise there as, to lean on to help us through this process means a lot to me. Plus, we very much value the partnership with Puebloplex, with Pura, and the fact that both of you have independently come to us to say the CRA is a good idea. That makes me feel like we're going in the right direction. So thank you for
Thank you.
being here. Even you, Miss Mitchell. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Welcome home.
Even, yeah. Sitting in the front row trying to pressure us into things.
She's on the opposite
Yeah.
side.
Thank you all. We certainly appreciate it. Next up, we have any operational updates?
None for me, Commissioner.
Good. I just have one caveat to my commissioner comments when I said the ice cream social was free. I don't believe that it is. So
That's a huge.
bring your money. Okay, that'll leave us with a request for executive session, Mr. Hirsch.
Yes, I am asking for an executive session to hold a conference with the county attorney to receive legal advice on specific legal questions pursuant to CRS 246402-4B regarding the roles of the county in response to the Aspen Acres fire, potential changes to the county stop loss and medical insurance coverage, bond counsel's analysis of financing of leased property relating to the county certificate of participation issuance, and the annexation of certain properties into the West Park Fire District, as well as to determine positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing a strategy for negotiations, and or instructing negotiators pursuant to CRS 246402-4E concerning a potential lease agreement with the Running Sports Complex Commission Incorporated and a potential energy watershed protection agreement with the Natural Resources Conservation Service.
Thank you. I will ask for a motion to go into executive session for the reasons cited.
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, we're in executive session.